everyone. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yep. All right. Cool. Thank you again for inviting me to give a rerun of this presentation. As I told Vera, I'm always excited about talking about the mammals anywhere, and more recently from Nashville, because it's been really pleasantly surprised with everything that I've been seeing here in Nashville. So I'm going to go ahead and start what I want to show to you guys. It's really preliminary data that we have. We have a lot of videos from a lot of places, but it's still like analyzing, going through them. But I have some hopefully some cool stuff to show to you guys here today. This is a project that is supported and sponsored by a larger initiative here at Vanderbilt. So the Ascend initiative, it's a Grand Challenge initiative, and this is the biodiversity sub-project of that initiative. So I should definitely thank them for allowing us to spread camera traps all over Nashville to see what mammals we get there. And of course, we have the support of Metro Parks and friends of Warner Parks as well. All right, so Vera has already introduced me. I just wanted to add that the majority of my work for the last, I don't know, few decades has been in Brazil. I'm from Brazil, and I do my work with mammals in different areas in Brazil, in Brazilian, mostly rural landscapes. And I do work with some capturing and tracking of animals. So here's me and a group of students in the Pantanal of Brazil, capturing a white-lipped peccary, which we later on tracked by radio collar. But I've done some camera trap for many years, not a lot, but I recently started getting more interested in doing some camera trap, and that's what I'm going to show to you guys here related to the Nashville project. Why mammals? So the reason I study mammals, and particularly medium to large size mammals, is that they actually come in many sizes. So from few grams to many kilos, larger, sometimes up to 100 kilo species. They have a variety of diets. So some are just plant eaters, some eat invertebrates, some eat vertebrates, but some eat a range of those things, and some are more specialized. They also live in many habitats, different for closed habitats, forest, water, near water, open vegetation, more urbanized areas. But also, again, they go from very specialized to very generalist. They have many functions, top-down regulation, as we call, so predators that regulate prey, herbivores that regulate plants. They can be ecosystem engineers, as we know, the classic example of beavers. And they are actually, when we study their abundances, their changes in abundances and the composition, which mammals are where, they can give us some indication of environmental quality and environmental disturbance. And although we talk about them as being secretive, so it's true that we go to many of the parks here in Nashville and we tend to see squirrels, sometimes we see a deer. If we're very lucky, we may see something else. But actually recording their presence, it's not that difficult, and especially because now we have, not now, it's been there for many years, but it's getting cheaper and cheaper to just acquire a lot of camera traps, as we call, that were probably developed for hunters. And we ecologists and field ecologists, conservationists took advantage of that. But basically they, for those of you that don't know how it works, you set them on a tree trunk, and they have like beam that detects movement as well as heat change. And if someone that is warm passes in front of the camera, it records the presence of that individual. So they're great to study those secretive homeotherms, so mammals and birds, and not only their occurrence, but you can actually study their behavior, their activities, and many other things that I'm not going to be talking about today, but can definitely be done with the camera traps as well. So as I said, more recently, I started getting interested in studying the mammals of Nashville. Why Nashville? As Vera mentioned, I'm really interested in this interaction between human presence and human activities and how that affects the other mammals, especially because we kind of tend to occupy the same spaces and work in the same temporal and spatial scales. So it is for me, I think, interesting to look at how we affect our fellow mammals. And Nashville, I've always been working more like rural landscapes in Brazil. And Nashville is a urban setting. So for me, it was interesting to see, okay, what should we expect to see in a city, right? And a medium-sized city, so it's not super large and super densely populated like, I don't know, New York or LA or any of those big cities, Chicago, here in the US, but it is a medium-sized city. It's been developing more and more. So we kind of expect to see a subset of the mammal community here, more sensitive species not being present. But if you look at this map here, which actually one of my students, two of my students helped me make with their information here, Nashville has a lot of green areas around it. So this is the scale from 0 to 100 of what we call this is the hardest word for me to say, imperviousness, but it means like how much green there is on the surface, right? And the more green there is, the more hot color, so the more red, the less green there is in the surface. And you see that there is, of course, downtown and like kind of like in the southeast of Nashville, there is less green, but there is still a lot of green around Nashville. The other interesting thing about Nashville is that it has actually a lot of rivers, so major rivers and some smaller rivers, and that also affects, as we are starting to see, affects the presence of different types of mammals. And finally, you can see here, thanks for Metro for that, we do have a lot of parks here. So set up public places to preserve green spaces. And that's where we put our camera traps. And I'm going to talk more about those locations in a bit. This project actually started in 2019 with one student, one undergrad, Dara Craig. She was a VU bio major, and prior to that, all my undergrads used to just analyze data that I would bring from Brazil. But then I realized that it would be probably a more interesting experience for them to actually collect some data and do the analysis from the data that they were collecting here. So Dara was excited when I told her, let's put some camera traps around Nashville. But we really started with only 5 camera traps, and we decided to put 1 camera trap per one different park. And we asked a very simple question that comes from a very established theory in ecology, which is the theory of island biogeography, that basically larger areas should just hold more species. So we wanted to see if that was true for the Nashville parks. So Dara made this map of all the green areas of Davidson County from a Landsat image of 2018, and she categorized those green areas into sizes. And the greener ones are larger sizes, so very large areas. So you see Percy Warner here. We see, I think this is the Redner Lake and some other areas that are connected to it here. And then the purple ones are a little smaller, so not as connected. And you see Shelby Bottoms here, kind of on its own, but kind of like intermediate size green area. And then you have all these little dots that are orange and pink and blue. They're really small places, still green areas, but disconnected from everything else. And we picked 5 places, though all of them under Metro designation, park designation. So Percy Warner's here, Shelby Bottoms, and then Isle, Paragon Mills, and Seven Oaks. And she put 1 camera in each of them, and we sampled them for 50 days. This is just a sample of what we got, or what Dara got. Some of the usual suspects, turkeys and cardinals and squirrels, raccoons, groundhog, white deer, coyote, a greco, and a opossum. But tabulating here her results in terms of number of pictures per place and per species, you see here that it doesn't really follow what we were expecting, right? So more species in the larger areas. But one important thing that I want you guys to see here is that there is a great variation in terms of the number of pictures per area. And that, when you look at it, this is an important type of analysis that you need to do when you do camera trap sampling, which is how many pictures are we getting, because the number of species that we get is highly dependent up to a point to the number of pictures that we're getting. So if you look at the sample effort, which is the same for all of them, 50 days, it seemed, I mean, they're all seem to be, some of them more than others seem to be reaching a plateau here in terms of, and then what you want is that eventually the more you sample, the less it changes, which means that we have a good sampling of the species. But when you plot that by sample size or number of pictures, you see that there's at least 2 or even 3 or maybe 4. Only Isle really is the one that seems to have had enough pictures to have a good sample size. The other ones are just shooting up. So it really tells us you need way more sampling to get a sense of what you would get there. So 2019, 2020, there were a few undergrads that wanted to do research with me, and I said, you know what, let's just put all our cameras, all the cameras that we have at Percy Warner. So we had 9 locations, 1 camera per location, but all along the red trail here at Percy Warner. And we looked at species richness. It's just the number of species that we would get. So the main question here, are there really only 6 species at Percy Warner? We doubted it. And then species composition, just who was there, and species abundance, so who was more frequently captured by the camera. And then there was one specific project from one student that started looking at activity of different species and variation in temperature. So here are the first, the data or the results from this first round at Percy Warner. Of course, we got way more pictures. So we were talking about 20 for Dara's sampling, and here we're talking about more than 1,000 pictures. And we, of course, ended up getting almost double of the species. I'd say, yes, more than double of the species here. We got armadillos, we got opossums that we hadn't gotten yet, we got skunk, we got coyote, and we even got a bobcat. So clearly you need way more sampling there to get the full range of species of mammals that we can get in one specific place. And that led us to wanted to do, okay, let's go back to sampling various areas in Nashville, but then increase the sampling effort per area, and both spatially and temporally. And of course, with the pandemic, I couldn't go to Brazil, so that even gave me even more incentive to work here in the summer. And that was what really triggered a lot of effort that we put into sampling these areas here in Nashville. So in 2021, 2022, so it's an ongoing project still. We, with 3 undergrads and 2 grad students, we set it up several cameras. We still had cameras in Percy Warner, but we put some at Hill Forest. I'll talk about that in a bit. Bell's Bend, Biman, and then some along the Mill Creek here, looking at a little bit more urbanized region of Nashville as well. And still, one of the undergrads is looking at effects of urbanization, so really like surface, green surface areas and how that affects the composition of mammals. Veronica is specifically looking at effects of distance from water, distance from creeks and rivers. And Michaela is looking at how the ambient temperature affects armadillo activity in the Nashville region and Memphis as well, but I'm not gonna talk about that today. All right, so today I'm going to specifically talk about what we've been finding in terms of just mammal abundance and composition in this 4 parks here. And hopefully in a near future, I'm going to be able to talk a little bit about these other parks as well, where we have cameras, but we put them a little later in the project, and we're still analyzing that data. All right, so Percy Warner, remember that we already had some sampling there, so we didn't quite expect to see a lot of difference in terms of and we think we had a very good sampling at Percy Warner. So we kind of just decided to continue that sampling so that we could compare to the other ones. We've been having the cameras there since April, but what I'm going to show to you guys is really the summer sampling here, April to August. We had 3 sites. One was a valley, and 2 were more hilltops at the Mossy Ridge. And I think in terms of what we got, there isn't much variation from what we had gotten already. I had 8 native species and dogs, of course. So there are a lot of people walking their dogs at Percy Warner. And so not much difference from what we got before. We actually got 1 less species, which is the skunk that we got into 2019, 2020. So that not a lot of difference there. We didn't expect so. Hill Forest is very close to Percy Warner. It's pretty much the same type of forest. The main difference is that it's not open for vegetation. So there isn't a lot of humans walking on trails there. We had also 3 sites, but at this time, there were 2 cameras placed in more of a valley area and 1 on a hilltop, and it's kind of the same amount of sampling in terms of time here, of months of what I showed for Percy Warner. And we had kind of the same species, but I think what's interesting about Hill Forest compared to Percy Warner is that the abundance or activity of the presence in the pictures is slightly more spread out for different species at Hill Forest than it is at Percy Warner. So we see that there's like a dominance of squirrel pictures at Percy Warner. So it's really like a dominated by squirrels, whereas for Hill Forest, we have squirrels and deer, of course, but we have a lot of pictures of raccoons, armadillos, and others. And the other interesting thing here, definitely had a lot of more activity in general. So you see here that we're talking about over 1,000 independent records, whereas here it's not even 400. And what I thought was really interesting to notice at Hill Forest is that we could record, so this is during the summer, right? So we kind of expect to see a lot of reproductive activity going on, a lot of new babies and new individuals showing up, but this is hard to record sometimes, right? And although for deer this is not that difficult, we do have a lot of deer with fawns in other areas. We did record that for Hill Forest. We actually, I think we have one that the fawn was like maybe a day old or something. It's not this one, but it's another one. We did have a lot of raccoon families showing up, and we even got lucky to see coyote just moving her cubs around in one of our sites. So many babies. So it seems like it's a forest that really holds. It's a safe place for these animals to reproduce. More so, I feel like, than Percy Warner, which we didn't have as many baby activity in the same period. Okay, so that's it, kind of like the interesting note from Hill Forest. Then we move on to Bell's Bend. Bell's Bend, for those of you that haven't been there, I really encourage you to go. It's a very different type of vegetation. It's more open. It's by the Cumberland River. So we have some meadows, we have some just open vegetation, grass, and then we have some strips of forest, and that's where we place our cameras. Again, 3 sites, one away, completely away from water, one by a pond that actually became a bit of a creek, and one by the Cumberland River. And this is from July to September, again, the summer period there. And we actually got 2 more species there. Rabbits, we kind of expected because it's a more open area. And we actually got an otter, which was super exciting. It was our first picture of an otter. So it increased our number of species here to 10 species total, or natives, right? Also, no dogs there. I think dogs have to be leashed there. But that was very exciting. And squirrels are not the dominant species there anymore. Armadillos are, and deer coming right after them. And again, the interesting note, I think, about Bell's Bend, which we hadn't gotten from the other 2 sites, is how many pictures we got of bobcats with prey. So here's the picture of the otter. That was the first one that we got ever in our camera trap. So as I said, we got pretty excited about it. But we got, just in the summer period, and I think we have more from later periods, 7 records of bobcats with prey in their mouths. So either a rabbit or a turkey, and I think there is another one that I'm not 100% sure what it is. So that was, again, a first for me. I don't know how common that is, but I think it's not very common. And it once again tells me that this is a pretty healthy ecosystem, that there is a lot of prey for those predators, and the predators are highly active there. Just 2 videos for you to see. So we started with the pictures, but then we moved to videos because it captures a lot of the behavior that the pictures don't. So, oops, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. So here is the bobcat with the 2 little bobcats with it. And here is also a deer, but with 2 fawns. So also a lot of babies. A very healthy ecosystem environment for those guys. Got scared. And there they go. Okay, so now the last one that I'll be talking about is Biman. Biman is on the north west side of Davidson County. It's actually Ashland City, but it's still Davidson County. It is really embedded in a lot of green here, and it's a type of vegetation that I'd say that is more similar to hill forest and Percy Warner, but much larger, and a lot of streams crossing the park. So it gave us a little bit more diversity in terms of types of habitats that we could sample. We had 4 sites during the summer, so 3 at a hilltop and 1 by a creek, so the Long Hollow Creek that crosses the halfway through the park. And we got actually 13 mammals recorded. That was really, really exciting for us. So again, the usual suspects there, squirrels, deer, raccoon, armadillo, but not so many squirrels, which is very surprising. Mostly a lot of raccoons, but mostly because we have a lot of records from the creek, which I'm going to show to you. We got, again, the predators, the common predators, coyote, bobcat, otter, again, a few records of otter, but then the new ones here are groundhog, which we had sampled before with Dara, but that was, it doesn't seem to be a very common species to show up in camera traps. The skunk that, again, we had sampled before, but kind of a rare one to show up in the camera. And finally, a completely new species, a species of weasel that we can't really identify too well. But we actually got more recently more videos of the same species in another creek by Biman, so maybe we'll be able to better identify that. And because there is a lot of human visitation, we do get a lot of dog videos as well. So especially by the creek, which is kind of one of the questions that we're trying to answer with this recent part of the project, we got a lot of different, most of the diversity and a lot of activities. So I'm just going to show, this is us setting up the cameras and doing a picnic stop by the creek in the summer. And I'm going to show here to you guys some of the activity that we got in that area by the Long Hollow Creek. So here's the weasel. So let me bring this back here, just going, oops, don't know what I'm doing. Doesn't want to play. Not very happy. Maybe the other one will work. Not a very good time for this to freeze. Too much for my computer, maybe. Uh-oh. It's not the rain, it's the computer. Okay, I'm going to restart it. So may take some questions while I do this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So if folks want to raise their hand, if you have a question for Malu, that would be great. Melissa's asking about foxes. I wondered about foxes too. Do you know why we're not seeing any foxes?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I was expecting someone to ask me that at some point. We don't get a lot of foxes at all. And I don't know why. I feel like maybe the fox, I was expecting to get some foxes at Bell's Bend because it's a more open area. And we definitely get some, we see some scats, we see some fox poop there, but maybe because we always need to put the cameras in like a shaded area. That might be the reason why we don't get the foxes. We do have a very, very few pictures, and I'm trying to remember from where they are. But yeah, I think it's a sample problem. I do think there are more foxes than we are able to sample, at least in Bell's Bend. But it's interesting. We don't get pictures of foxes at all. And we know it, I mean, in the neighborhoods, we know that they're all over the place. So one of the things that we've been thinking about is to actually do, eventually in the future, ask people to put cameras in their backyards and kind of compare what mammals we get there compared to the parks. Should I continue or should I answer any other questions? Maybe I should continue, right?
Yeah, why don't you continue with the videos and then we'll do questions at the end.
Okay, so let's see if this one plays. Okay, so this is the Weasel. Let me just hide this. And this is, so the Weasel goes in one direction, and right after that, the Weasel comes, oops, in the other direction. So about an hour later. And I thought that was kind of cool. All right, and this is the skunk. Just so this is all the same Long Hollow Creek place. And this is a family of otters, which I thought, again, I was very surprised that we got a few videos of families of otters. So I thought this was a cool thing. This is a raccoon, and we got so many videos of raccoons, but I love that they're always like trying to find some food under the rock bed there. So really important habitat for them. Look, this is he's eating, and this is our deer armadillo just crossing the river. I think that's it. So in summary, I think I'm actually getting close to the end here. In summary, this is what we get from these parks, like a good sized parks in the western side of Nashville, where we have more green area in general. And I do think that there's some interesting things here, such as that where we get more water, we end up getting more species, so more diversity of mammals. We definitely have a dominance of squirrels at Percy Warner, not so much deer, right? One would imagine we have so much deer at Percy Warner, but squirrels are the ones that show up in the cameras for sure. But we have other species dominating in other areas. So I think from this sampling, we can say that Nashville is actually doing pretty well in terms of diversity of habitats and amount of habitats and quality of habitats for the wild mammals. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are analyzing the data from the last not so so green areas in the other parks in Nashville. We do have some interesting data there and kind of high diversity too. We're going to see not as much as in these areas here, but again, by the rivers, especially at Isle, we have a lot of very interesting activities. So more to come. And those are the analysis that Stel, Veronica, and Michaela are doing, and will be presenting by the end of the semester. With that, I want to thank all my students that are always super willing to help me in the field and enter the data and are super excited to do this work, and everybody that has been supporting me logistically and institutionally, Vanderbilt, ASAN, and Metro Parks, and Friends of Warner Parks. I'll be happy to take questions, and if you guys, after the questions, and if I have some time, I can show a few more videos if you're interested. I do have to stop at 11:55 though, but we have several minutes here for questions and more videos. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think if you want to raise your hand or in the chat, either place, to ask Malu some questions, we have time for that. How can we keep up with your future data?
What do you mean? Can you explain the question? Oh, I'll be happy to give you guys another presentation by the beginning of next semester and show all the remaining of the data that we're doing the analysis right now.
Great. Laura is asking, were there other mammals you expected that were not documented?
So that's a good question. Definitely foxes. I expect to get way more foxes. Beaver is one that I would expect to see by the creeks. We may have one record of one beaver, but not a lot of beaver activity. So that's one that I would expect to see. What else? But I think that's it. I think our cameras are capturing the majority of the wild mammals that I would expect to see here in Nashville.
Terry Cook has a question.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. I work with the Nature Conservancy, and we have been doing some camera traps at Stones River Bend, also known as Lytle Bend, Stones River Park. And I'm happy to share that. That's in sort of on the eastern edge of Nashville, another geography for you. We have gotten fox there, but very few. We have gotten beaver there as well, but it may be another nice comparison to what you're doing. Stones River has not been open to the public. So Metro Parks has had it probably, what, Vera, a decade or so? And so we've had cameras out there for the last couple of years, photo and video, but happy to share any of that with you just for another comparison.
Sure, that sounds awesome. We should definitely, yeah, incorporate that in the whole package here and do some comparisons. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Why does Percy Warner have so many squirrels?
I don't know. I have some guesses, but those are just guesses, right? I do think that squirrels tend to do better when there is a lot of human activity in general. Percy Warner is closer to suburban areas, and there is just a lot of people there. And even if I know that people are not leaving a lot of garbage there, they could benefit from it. Yes, less predators, although we do have a lot of owls there, right? So it's interesting. I think the owls are benefiting from the fact that there are a lot of squirrels at Percy Warner. But maybe, yeah, less bobcats and less coyotes and foxes in general, just because of a lot of human activity. So it could be that too. But I do think there is a bit of like a supporting system from the neighborhood area to pursue Warner to make it have a lot of squirrels there. But that's just a hypothesis.
Molly. You're on mute, Molly. You got to unmute.
In the area around in Westmead, for instance, there's huge numbers of deer. And is it just that we see the deer and we don't see other animals nearly as numerous? Or it seems like the percentage of mammals that you see is primarily squirrels or deer, but deer in huge numbers.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a sampling bias or our perception, right? So deer is definitely a mammal that if it's passing or if it's crossing, you're going to see it. It's it's not completely diurnal, but it has a lot of activity like by beginning and end of the day, which is also when we are around. So I think there is a lot of that. I think the cameras, because they are able to spread out across the entire 24 hours, and they're capturing everything that is passing, small or large. I think the cameras have a better distribution of their abundance / activity. It's not only abundance, but it's also activity. So I do think our perception is a bit biased towards deers, but there is a lot of deer, no matter what.
We have a question about flying squirrels. I wondered about flying squirrels as well.
Yeah, we haven't sampled them at all. It could be a problem with the cameras, right? That the cameras are usually low and maybe they're too fast. Although we do get like chipmunks just running in front of the cameras. So, but it may be not the ideal way of sampling presence of flying squirrels, which I think occur, but maybe we'll have to put the cameras in different heights to see that.
Any other questions for Malu? Okay, well, thank you all for attending, and thank you, Malu, for sharing your research with us. And we will be continuing this discussion and want to see more results of your data. And I like having this networking so that we can share, for instance, what Terry's doing at Stones Bend and, other things that we're doing. I know Friends of Warner Parks with the Nature Conservancy just did a forest inventory of Warner. And so maybe just putting, more layers of vegetation data and other data on this research as you get, more camera trap images, and just continuing the learning. It's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you all. And I'll be super happy to continue to share all this data. And I'm happy that we did make this network and we can continue collaborating with all of you. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe today, and we'll be in touch soon. Have a great day.